Good morning, everyone. Welcome to The Modern Market. It's our daily show from Monday to Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern Time, 11 a.m. GMT, every day of the week, where we discuss all things to do with the modern market. That is the crypto market, the NFT market, and how to make some or a lot of money on the internet. I'm your host, B-Check. I'm joined by my legendary co-host, Legendary and Sammy. And today we have a very special guest with us. We have the head of community and education from Ledger and good friend Mo. Welcome to the stage with us, Mo. Can't wait to get into a big conversation with you on everything going on in the markets in just a little bit. But just a reminder, friends, before we get into it, as always, nothing that we say here is financial advice. We do not know anything for sure. So please do proceed with caution and exercise your own judgment. With that out of the way, Legendary, it is Tuesday. It is the 19th of March. There is blood on the streets. How are you doing? How are you feeling?
GM, doing quite well. I've finally finished restructuring my portfolio, doing all of the cleanup things that I wanted to do, getting a bit of an overview of all the assets. Used the dip to buy a couple of things that I wanted to have. Finally, also got a chance to test Liquidium, which we've been speaking about yesterday in the V.3, the closed beta of that.
Yes.
Found someone to borrow. To basically, I'm now lending and provide liquidity for a NodeMonkey owner. Ooh. And because it's so early, because I just recently opened that, I'm now number 4 on the leaderboard of the closed beta with just that one NodeMonk, which is
why are you ahead of me?
Because the leaderboard for the closed beta is separate to the regular protocol, and it's just a sight to behold. Look, I'm gonna enjoy my day where I'm number 4 on this leaderboard until everyone else is catching up with it, and that kind of allows me to not have to look at CoinMarketCap and see the blood in the market.
Number 4 of like 5 people, maybe.
Exactly, yeah. But hey, just
okay.
Let's focus on the first number, not on the second.
Okay, that's fine. Well, you seem pretty optimistic, pretty happy on a very significantly red day. Mo, how are you feeling? Welcome to the stage with us first. Glad to have you with us. And how are you feeling on this quite red day all round?
Thanks for having me, guys. Well, honestly, feeling pretty confident. Like, I think we see these dips on a pretty regular basis. It's not my first cycle, so now I'm used to this. You know, the meme with the guy, having the thing around his neck is like, first time, right? And that's exactly how I'm feeling.
Nice.
Honestly, I think we've never had stronger fundamentals in terms of, institutional and geopolitical tailwinds. So pretty confident going into this bull cycle. I don't know how long it's going to last. I don't know if we're there yet in terms of like starting the real, bull, but definitely pretty interesting and a lot of like movements on the market. It's been an interesting weekend so far. And usually when things go become so crazy and there's a lot of froth, it's kind of like a local top. So always good to see a little bit of correction and seeing things stabilize a bit.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely correct. Definitely we'll speak about the kind of wild weekend of like goings on the last few days, which maybe signaled like some type of froth or some type of local top at least. But you mentioned this is not your first cycle, Mo. Do you want to just quickly introduce yourself to the people? Like, how experienced are you? When did you kind of get into crypto? And like, what makes you able to be so confident at this moment?
Well, I got into crypto about 7 years ago, but this is, so technically it's kind of my third cycle, but I wasn't really invested in the market on my first cycle. I was just like watching from afar with not a lot of skin in the game. So technically that's my second real cycle. And yeah, I mean, confidence doesn't necessarily come from obviously the experience of going through cycles. It's more about the kind of knowledge that I've spent a lot of time kind of diving deeper into like the macroeconomic environment and more from a geopolitical standpoint. And I think that if you spend a little bit of time and kind of diving into what's happening in the world from a geopolitical standpoint, and you layer on top of that what's happened in the United States from an institutional and regulatory perspective, you kind of understand that the narrative around Bitcoin is super strong. I don't think it's ever been stronger. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's only up, but it definitely means that instead of having a lot of barriers, we kind of have tailwinds for the first time. Obviously, this is not guaranteed that it will keep going the way it is, but definitely the United States are a huge influence on the world. And for now, the fact that we have spot ETFs, that the inflows have been consistent over the past few weeks, and that Bitcoin became kind of a political topic that has to be brought up for the upcoming US elections is very, very bullish. And then you kind of see that on the other side with countries that are kind of trying to de-risk their exposure, their kind of overall exposure to the dollar, what we would call overall like the de-dollarization of emerging economies is definitely also a driver, because who wants to hold another currency than the dollar? There aren't any currencies out there apart maybe from gold as a commodity, where you would want to kind of hold gold in your treasury as a reserve bank. But Bitcoin is getting stronger in terms of being that alternative, and there are rumors of countries buying Bitcoin around the world. I don't know how true these rumors are, but definitely a lot of like different elements coming together. So
yeah, really interesting stuff. I think that geopolitical aspect, I mean, we've spoken a lot kind of outside of the show, just kind of talking about how deeply immersed we are in the space, and how we almost find it difficult to get out, because we're genuinely so interested in it and looking into things from all the different angles. So definitely going to appreciate those perspectives as we speak about them more as the show goes on. Sammy, quick touch in with you as well before we hit the headlines, get into some bigger discussions, talk some airdrop alpha from Legendary in just a little bit. Feeling fine, feeling calm as the market kind of downturns?
Yeah, I think I agree with you guys. I think, to be honest, it's hit the 350-day moving average, so it's kind of bounced off that. And I think that the whole frothy, I mean, it's pretty much been up only for so long now. You kind of expect a bit of a pullback. So for me, I'm not overly concerned. And actually, to be honest, I've been farming Parcel, which requires USDC. So I'm kind of hoping for that pullback to then reinvest at a lower level. So it's good from my perspective.
Yeah, probably decent for people who are like sitting not in crypto, hoping for it to go lower whilst they're using their USD for some like other use cases at the moment. We're going to talk about some of those use cases in just a little bit. We had a big win yesterday with some of the EtherFi, with the EtherFi airdrop, which is to do with restaking. We're going to touch on that narrative again today because we think it's important. But before we do that, let's get into the headlines, as always, brought to you from the Snapshot, which is pinned up top. If you do find it bring you some value today, please do give it a like. So starting with the price action, we've got Bitcoin down 6% at 63.5K, ETH down 9% at 3.3K, Solana even down 12%, back down to $176. First headline is crypto bloodbath, BTC down, all the prices I just mentioned. Number two, Fidelity adds staking to their ETH ETF application. Some people still suggesting that this does not mean that it's going to go through, that the likelihood is still that it's going to fail. Some thoughts suggesting that this going or being part of the application suggests that Coinbase has won their case. Not sure if that's connected necessarily, just some opinions from the timeline. We'll talk about it a little bit later. And finally, the final headline, NFT Nick reports Nike to shut down Artifact. He said that Nike will shut down Artifact this year following $1 billion acquisition in 2021. Just to be very clear, this was denied by the Artifact team. Zaptio replied in the comments to say, seems like we missed the memo on our shutdown. Stay tuned for the next episode of Rumors from the Cryptoverse. Also, yeah, just worth noting that this was reported by Nick, who has reported certain things before. It has been denied various times before. And the things have come to fruition, but it's just a report at this stage. We have no particular confirmation. Getting into some notable sales, we had the Achi dog with hat sale yesterday for 1,200 ETH. You had a Node Monk Gold selling for 1.85 Bitcoin and a CryptoPunk Wildhair selling for 55 ETH. In terms of some floor prices, we had CryptoPunks down 1% at 48 ETH, Bored Apes at 13.3, down 4%, Mutants up 3% at 2.3, DGods down a couple of percent at 1.4, Captains down 2% at 3.8, Azuki's down at 3.8. Also, Penguins at 10.5, Mad Lads down a few more percent at 170 Sol, and the Nouns winning bid was at 5.3 ETH. Legendary, those are the headlines. That is the price action. Before we get into a discussion on those, any numbers in particular catching your eye?
Absolutely, yeah. I find it interesting about the WIF picture that while the meme coin is trading on Solana, the JPEG sold on ETH. I just think that's an interesting thing to observe, and I bet that you wouldn't have found a buyer at the price level on Solana. And it's quite cool that it's basically chain agnostic. The meme coin exists on Solana, the JPEG is trading on ETH, and you have different audiences for different purposes. You can gamble the meme coin on Solana, you can throw significant money at the original picture on ETH.
I have a question about this because I've seen this and I think it's quite cool that the people, well, whoever bought this on ETH, well, I think it's GCR, right? GCR bought it on ETH. Do you think if it was the other way around, it would have worked? Like, would Solana people, if you can even categorize them in that way, if there was a meme on ETH, would someone have bid it on Solana? Or is that just not the way that it works? It's like ultimately the big capital is on ETH, and this is always the way around it's going to be. Do you have a perspective on that?
Yeah, I think it works that way around, but not the other way around, especially with thinking about gas fees. Kind of makes sense. It's something that has the trading volume of WIF. You want to have it on a place where there's like lower gas fees, whereas it doesn't. Gas fees don't really matter if you spend more than 1k ETH on anything, really.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine. I wanted to ask you about the price action as well, though, Legendary. One thing that struck me, and I know that you've been making some moves in the market that in the last 24 hours as a consequence, is that crypto is kind of down significantly, or a reasonable clip. But NFTs, after being down aggressively like for a period of time, haven't like been hugely affected by this particular downturn, at least not yet. It seems like you thought this was a good time to potentially be a buyer. Do you want to kind of talk through your thinking, maybe what you were targeting, why you were thinking that way?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been moving into stables a bit over the last weeks, and I kind of wanted to buy the dip, and basically saw like the low dollar valuation of some JPEGs and some things that I wanted to have as a good occasion to buy in. Obviously did buy the Azuki that I shared today. Did buy a bit more than 10 elementals as well over the last week. Thinking here is that Azuki has been pushing that collector status. Obviously, you have had the token rumors around the anime token for quite a while. You have the anime or its first episode upcoming over, I think, the next 1 to 1.5 months. Obviously, might go lower. We don't know when this correction is going to be over, but like for my personal risk preference, I liked that entry point in US dollar terms. And I've also seen that the team tried to get a couple token allocations for Blast, and those allocations only went to Azuki OG holders. So I was like, I can't just be buying a shit ton of elementals and not have an OG Azuki, because I do think that top tier assets have been rewarded handsomely on the one hand. On the other hand, I can't only buy an OG Azuki and not buy elementals because they're trading like at 1 to 12 ratio of the OG Azuki price. So I was like, fuck it, just buy both.
Okay, very nuanced take there. Like that's a very in-depth thesis. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's very interesting to see. I saw Hunter post something similar the other day, and I remember thinking, okay, I can see why that makes sense, particularly at those prices for elementals in particular. Sammy, did you have any thoughts in terms of the price action? Then we're going to go to Mo in a second, kind of reflecting on the meme coin craze that's kind of taken hold and whether that's a cause or a symptom of what's going on in the broader markets. Sammy first.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds sensible to rotate it into NFTs given the pullback. So I think there's probably some bargains to be had. If you've made some money in meme coins, it makes sense potentially at some point they're going to rip. There might be a little bit more downside, I think. I mean, I look at it in terms of a risk curve. If you've got NFTs that are a little bit more illiquid, then they're probably the price action's going to suffer a little bit more. So I think that potentially, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I just think potentially that it could be a good play at the moment. There might be a little bit more downside, but I mean, historically, when things do tend to rip, they tend to go pretty hard. So Azuki sounds like a sensible play.
I think I was just reacting to your take that the sentence was something like, oh yeah, it could be sensible to rotate into NFTs. And like, I don't know how sensible it's been I think it's sensible to the point where it's like, no, this is actually the thing that makes most sense.
I think from a logical point of view, that if they've been down for a little while, it makes sense that they're probably going to go back up at some point. So there might be a bit of time that you hold it for, but yeah, I mean, I personally think there's probably a little bit more downside, especially if Bitcoin then reverts to the upside and then rips again and ETH goes. Obviously, we had the news recently about the ETH staking. So was it Fidelity? They kind of revised that with ETH staking, which suggests that Coinbase is potentially that they've won that case. So yeah, I mean, there could be some bullish news in the fungible side of things, which they could then rip, and then ETH have historically suffered. ETH NFTs have historically suffered when that's happened. So yeah, it's hard to tell.
Fair enough. Mo, would love to get your perspective on this as well. I don't know to what extent you collect on like the profile picture side of things, but I know you collect more generally. How are you thinking about the kind of ETH NFT market versus any other NFT market, and your broader reflections on the kind of crypto, the Memecoin mania from the last couple of days?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a great time to be a collector at the moment on ETH. If you denominate in ETH, everything is definitely much cheaper. If you denominate in dollar, most things are cheaper, not everything. But I think that's the thing, right? Like, the value of the NFTs is so much correlated to the price of ETH that if you actually held ETH along the way, you're much better off buying things today than you were during the bear market, for instance. So I think that for Grail art, generative art, AI art, so many different opportunities in the market as a collector at the moment. Definitely been buying a lot of AI art. I think this is definitely going to be a meta coming into the cycle. Even if you compare like the market cap of generative art versus AI art, the market cap of AI art is orders of magnitude lower than generative art. And if you think about, the next chapter of the art history books, it'll definitely have a generative chapter and it'll also have an AI chapter. And if you look at like the AI art OGs, their different collections, folks like, Gene Kogan, Claire Silver, the early Braindrops, collections, the early Fellowship AI collections, so many great art out there that you can collect. Definitely been buying a bit of Auntiverse, nice aunties, very, impressive collection. I highly advise you guys to check it out, but it has definitely captured a lot of attention lately.
Interesting.
And then overall, like PFPs, haven't been buying any. I think, the value of community is still there, but there's too many risks associated with it and a lot of volatility as well. I do see the value as a trader, but that's not how I function. I'm more of a collector than a trader. And then when it comes to meme coins, I don't know if you guys saw Naval's tweet the other day.
When was it?
NFTs are the tokenization of art. Meme coins are the tokenization of NFTs. So basically what he's trying to say there is...
Does that definitely make sense?
It definitely makes you think about how do you make NFTs a bit more liquid, and in terms of like the community and the meme aspect of it, because we were talking about it right before the show starts. And you started having Memecoin pre-sales that were also raising funds for building IP and launching content and marketing projects. Like they had the whole breakdown of the project, like 6% is going to marketing, 10% is going to content, and then, I don't know, 40% is going to IP. So I think it's a way to actually infuse a little bit more of liquidity into projects that might be at the intersection of both kind of meme coins and NFTs. But then overall, that's why I was saying at the beginning that I don't think that the real bull market has started yet, because liquidity in the market is very limited for now, and that's why we see the shifts of meta trends being so quick. It's a game of musical chairs. There's a little bit of money in the market and it's going from somewhere, and then it heads somewhere else, and so on and so forth. So definitely very interesting to see the pace at which things were at this weekend. And if you look at it more from an analytical standpoint, like you've layered up the social media, like the internet of information, where information moves so fast. And then you layered on top of that a blockchain with like value moving so fast on Solana. So it means it can move fast. It's easy to use and it's not costly. And then that's why you get people like raising $30 million in the space of a few hours, and others raising 12 million. Like in terms of use case, this is incredible. Like I don't think anyone has been able to raise so much funds and distribute information at such a scale in such a limited time. And then when it comes to the meme coins, obviously it's not the most purposeful use case, but it's definitely great onboarding to folks, because meme coins compete with sports betting. They don't compete with Bitcoin or Ethereum. It's another like market. The total addressable market is so much wider. So yeah,
I think that's really fair. Very interesting perspectives there. I do think that I agree with you that it's kind of a different market. It's just bringing in a whole group of different types of people. Wild speculation. Moon Overlord had this tweet going out I think it was yesterday, saying, turns out you guys sending all your money to scammers for pre-sales was a top signal. I think it was just reaching quite unfathomable levels in the last few days, to the point where I literally over the weekend had to log off. I couldn't go through the timeline anymore. And it's not, I rarely get to that point, because nothing in crypto usually gets to me in any way. Like I'm quite pro just dealing with whatever's on the timeline, but I felt it was so overbearing that I didn't want to basically I'd made the decision I didn't want to participate in any pre-sales. So I was like, I'm just not, and all I'm seeing is pre-sales or pre-sale related stuff. So I made the executive decision to just walk away and come back when hopefully they've stopped. But interesting point that you made. Maybe a final reflection on this. Then want to hear from Legendary on the restaking narrative and the opportunity there. But like from a use case perspective, the fact that you can raise so much so quickly is actually pretty fascinating. Like purely from that perspective alone, I think it's pretty interesting that you're able to do that so quickly. Actually, just before we get to Legendary, Funky, you've had your hand raised for a moment. Would love to get your perspective for a quick hit before we go into Legendary's take on the EtherFi airdrop and the restaking narrative.
GM Modern Market Fam. It looks like I picked the right week to take a digital detox and take a week off and all this madness. But I think Mo made some great points. And one of the things what you were talking about before made me think about, remember months ago when we started covering Solana NFTs and you were talking about how sensitive they were to the price movement of the token.
Yes.
And we weren't really seeing that in ETH and everything else. And I'm starting to wonder if the run and everything had gotten so frothy, Bitcoin crossing 70K, ETH crossing 4K, if we start to see that price sensitivity creep into those NFTs. But I think everything else that everybody else, Stammy, brought up, just the rotation to memes. And I think there is something to be said about the tokenization, maybe even more broadly than Naval's point, of the culture of Web3. That, memes do something to all of us, right? Like anybody who's been in this space for a long time knows how powerful they can be. You can make a lot of quick money. Obviously, I didn't play in any of these memes. I missed a lot of it. But either which way, it's been interesting to watch all this. And I completely agree with Mo in the sense that this is just the beginning. We're seeing sort of that pre-halving retrace that we often see. Okay. I think it's only a matter of time before we really take off, maybe after the summer.
Interesting. And I know, Funky, you've been around in Bitcoin for a lot longer than me. So we'll definitely be wanting to get your perspectives as we go into the halvening, to kind of like for historical analysis of how these things usually play out. No guarantee that it will play out exactly the same way, but at least to know that from a historical perspective will be super useful. Legendary, we want to get into the headlines in a minute, but we've got to touch on the EtherFi airdrop, which was yesterday. It was a big W for yourself and myself. something we've been speaking about a lot as a potential opportunity in the space. Also just a genuinely interesting thing that's happening with Ethereum when people keep talking about, oh, what's the point of ETH? You've got all of this stuff going on Solana, and then you've got the Bitcoin narrative. What's going on with ETH? It's like stuck in the middle. It's like, are you paying attention to restaking? Legendaries, I'm going to hand it over to you here with this tweet from CC2 Ventures. Said, given how lucrative the EtherFi airdrop turned out, and with the restaking narrative not stopping until the biggest gorilla in the arena has its TGE, which is Eigenlayer, obviously, which should be coming at some point soon. He goes on to explain this other opportunity, which is Zirkit L2, AI-enabled modular ZK rollup, raised 80 million from Dragonfly and Pantera, received a grant by the Ethereum Foundation. By depositing into their protocol, you get staking APR, restaking APR, Eigenlayer points, LRT airdrop, Zirkit airdrop. So there's just like multiple opportunities here. Yes, there's smart contract risk as always with all of these protocols, so take that into account. But Legendary, I want you to kind of speak to the EtherFi drop, why that was so good, and what the potential is moving forward for people.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's maybe take a step back and
Yes,
set it up
please.
with EtherFi first. EtherFi, obviously a restaking solution that allows you to deposit into Eigenlayer. They had the airdrop yesterday, got quite a lot of attention because they had surpassed 2 billion TVL, where a Binance Launch Pool token. Just a bit of stats on the token airdrop itself. The top 500 wallets got 35% of the airdrop and contributed 60% of the ETH. And they did adjust the airdrop metrics to basically cap the people providing liquidity or restaking ETH, not providing liquidity on the top end, especially after Justin Sun basically just came in a couple days ago, put in 20 mil and had like 1 or 2% of the total airdrop. Token then started trading at around $4.5, corrected down to $3.2, $3.3, which puts it at a $3.3 billion FDV. It was also only season 1. There's a season 2 to come with, I think, another 4% of the, 5% of the token supply to be distributed in season 2. And connecting that to the post that you just shared by CC, it's interesting to observe how many like restaking plays there are right now. That it even got to the point, and I'm going to get to a couple of those in a second, that it even got to a point that you now have protocols. If you basically think about the whole infrastructure, you have staking, liquid staking, then you have restaking that's being built on top of it with Eigenlayer. Then you have protocols on top of that that just allow you to put money into Eigenlayer in a bit more of a convenient way. And now because you have so many protocols like Renzo, EtherFi, and others doing that, you now have restaking aggregators like StakeEasy that just allows you to pick any of those solutions and throw your money into, and you get to that absurd point where you can like farm or collect points on 3 to 4 different platforms at a time. And right now, if you look at all those restaking strategies, you have Kelp, which sits at 640 mil TVL. You have Renzo, which is also the one that CC mentioned in their tweet, sitting at 1 billion TVL. Renzo also being available on Blast, also being able to be deposited into a Wasabi vault that, again, allows you to farm like probably 4 airdrops at once plus Blast points. EtherFi that we just mentioned with 2.8 billion TVL, Claystack with 8 mil, Genesis with 799K, Bedrock with 121 mil, and Inception with 7 mil. So there's definitely, it's definitely an interesting meta to observe. And it's also impressive how quick things can change. I think one of the big reasons why EtherFi was such a good win for me is that it was just early to the protocol, and I kind of discovered it when it was under 30 million TVL, and never expected that to hit to almost 3 billion. So depending on the risk preference and liquidity, there might be a couple of plays to look into some of those smaller protocols, and I was pretty sure that Brett is going to come up on stage on this once we touch the restaking topic. Love to see that. Depending if you want to go for some of the protocols with a lower TVL or just to try to find a strategy that allows you to triple or quadruple dip.
Yes, look, I think that's a really helpful analysis and summary of the EtherFi position and also the general opportunities with restaking. I would definitely want to go to Brett in a moment because he is someone I trust a lot on this whole restaking narrative. Just one more kind of interesting detail from the EtherFi airdrop is that there were these EtherFan NFTs which you could mint for as little as, I think it was 0.1 ETH. And in the end, for minting one EtherFi fan NFT, you ended up with like 600 something EtherFi points, which was basically 2K. So
and I think it's important to mention that the 0.1 mint wasn't a mint where you pay for the JPEG. The JPEG was free. We're just restaking 0.1 ETH that are tied to the JPEG and that you can withdraw at any time. Also, if you withdraw early, there's a penalty that you pay, but I think like after 90 or 100 days or something along that lines, you could basically just burn the JPEG and claim your ETH back.
Yeah, so it wasn't even buying, and I mean, technically, yes, you mint an NFT, but it was kind of like you're depositing the ETH, you get an NFT in return. After this time period, you get the ETH back, plus you're getting EtherFi tokens, which were worth 2K. So pretty outstanding play there for the people who are participating. And the interesting thing about this whole situation, or this is why we're paying so much attention to it, is that there's multiple other protocols doing the exact same thing at the moment. So I suspect someone like Justin Sun flying in one day with $5 million or however much it was 3 days before the airdrop just to claim the points can now take those 5 million and go and do it in every single protocol potentially. And there's no reason why, although you may not have $5 million, no reason why you can't do something similar because they really want to attract your capital right now. Brad, would love to throw to you before we get into a bigger discussion on the headlines for a quick perspective on restaking, the EtherFi airdrop in particular. I know you produced some really awesome notes, which I shared with our community on the kind of EtherFi community call. How did you feel it came out sitting at a $3.3 billion FDV? What are your thoughts, my friend?
Hey. Yeah, I'm morning walk. Hope you can hear me. Yeah, I thought good. I thought it came out well. I think it'll actually bleed up a little bit higher. I think for the #1 restaking protocol by TVL right now, a little over $1 billion or $2 billion, I believe. To like for something that's going to redefine like effectively what Ethereum can and cannot do is a little undervalued when you look at stuff like Lido. Lido is the #1 staking, #1 liquid staking platform, and some of the stuff that EtherFi is going to be doing. Like I don't know, I just think it's going to bleed up. You're going to get a lot of PS5 sellers right now, and you're seeing that in the actual price chart. But I think it'll bleed up a little bit. But I wanted to come and mention about some of those things lower down, because some of these restaking platforms have announced what they plan to do, and are these liquid restaking platforms, and most of them are going to pivot into actually being L2s. So you mentioned Zirkit, which is facilitating some of these things going to L2s. Renzo's doing that same thing. My actual positioning is I'm going after Swell, because Swell is going to be an L2 on top of Eigenlayer. So it's going to be a restaked rollup is what they're defining it as. And it's actually a little deceptive on their TVL because they're actually a staking provider before, or liquid staking. So although they only have 180 million-ish of liquid restaking tokens, they actually have about 800 million in staking or liquid staking tokens. So their actual protocol TVL is much, much higher in the ranks. And you can take that stuff, and what some people did very successfully was Pendle, which is a DeFi protocol, has these unique derivatives where you can actually take leverage bets either on purely the underlying asset or just the yield atop them. So the Eigenlayer and or the Swell pearls or Renzo points, easy points, whatever you want to call them. And you can deposit ETH and have that entire ETH go purely towards a leverage bet on the points with a maturity date. So as an example, the Swell pearls are offering a bonus of 4.5 times the earnings per ETH on Pendle. And if you take your 1 ETH, put it into Pendle, and buy with the yield side of that, which is just the points, just the Eigenlayer and pearls, you can get up to 50 times your earnings on just those points as your Ethereum trends to 0 on the maturity date, which is the end of June. And the good news about that is PGE already announced end of April. So you can put your ETH in this thing, have it go about 30% to maturity, which so you're going to get about 0.7 back. In that time, earn about 50 times the pearls, and I think it's about 10 times the Eigenlayer points over that duration, and then withdraw the remainder of your ETH. So over that time, you're leveraging like crazy. So some people did this over the course of the last 6 weeks towards the EtherFi drop. And again, you have to check the maturity date on these things. And someone over the course of 6 weeks with 40 ETH lost 10 ETH because of maturity date, and over that time earned 30,000 EtherFi points, which netted him about a 50% gain just on the EtherFi points down his entire ETH position, while only losing that 10 out of 40 ETH, and then not even including its Eigenlayer points, which again are selling for about 16 cents a piece on Whales Market. So I'm going pretty heavy on that on Swell right now, knowing the TGE and knowing L2 is coming here in the second half of 24.
Interesting. Man, that's like obviously a very advanced strategy. Thank you so much for explaining it. Two things, my kind of key takeaways. One, after our previous conversation the other day, I'd already written down in my notebook, like Swell Network L2. Like it's on my to-do list to get on top of it a bit more. And the second reflection on everything you're saying is, man, I wish there was a diagram for what you just explained. I think it's really, really helpful.
Yeah, I'm writing something up. I'll send it to you guys.
Amazing. That would be really, really awesome. And we'd be happy to share that around because I think that's really interesting and helpful information, man. Thank you so much for sharing it. Look, I think we need to get into the headlines now. We've only got 20 minutes left of the show. So let's get into the big conversation about the crypto drawdown. We obviously have had everything down the last 24 hours after a lot of froth in the market. We've got Bitcoin down 8%, ETH down almost 10%, Solana down 15%. Yeah, big corrections across the market. Sammy, what are your thoughts with this type of correction? We kind of touched on it at the start of the show, people feeling like relatively confident in it. Do you think this is caused by just the craziness from the Memecoin mania? Do you think there's anything else? What are your reflections here?
Well, I think originally there was some commentary that there was liquidity being dragged from not just one meme coin to another, but from the wider market to chase the pump on Sol meme coins. But I do think it's just a correction. I don't think there's much more than that. I know that if you look at the grayscale outflows, they're still happening. So you've got that sell pressure on Bitcoin anyway. The ETF inflows are still reasonable. It's not like those are slowing down. So I think the longer term picture is still pretty much driven by institutional. So I don't necessarily think retail's here. If you look at like the Google Trends, Solana pumped to new highs for the Google Trends stuff. But if you look at crypto, Bitcoin, that kind of stuff, it's not quite there yet. It's still relatively early. I know it could potentially be a leading indicator as opposed to a lagging indicator. So if that's something to go by, then you could probably expect a bit more upside when retail does arrive. But I do think this cycle is probably going to be dominated by institutional rather than retail.
I love that point. I think most people are kind of moving towards that and accepting that and internalizing that kind of idea. I'd love to bring in this chart that Mo just shared. Mo, maybe you can speak to this. It seems like the inflows onto the Bitcoin ETF have been positive relentlessly over the last maybe 2 weeks, according to this chart that we're sharing on YouTube and on X video. But it seems like yesterday we had some negative flows. Do you want to speak to this?
Yeah, I mean, I'm 100% agree with what was just said. Institutions are going to be driving this cycle, I think, at least for the foreseeable future, until we have more liquidity coming in from the retail side. But if you think about it, like the context between today and 2021 is radically different. 2021, you had low interest rates and stimulus checks. Today, you have none of these. If you look at like the savings of U.S. households, they are probably at an all-time low. In terms of like the credit, rates and risks, they're probably at an all-time high. I don't have the exact number, but a lot of people are in debt, and a lot of people don't have any savings compared to 2021, where it was kind of the other way around. So the movement of the market was very much driven by the injection of liquidity into the market that went to the pockets of regular folks that then started investing in crypto. Out here, what we see on this chart is basically, very much correlated to the price movement that we've seen on the market for the past few weeks. Like, it basically pumps when there is liquidity coming in from the institutions, and dumps when the outflows are negative. But it's kind of important to underline as well that the sell pressure from GBTC will start stabilizing or decreasing as we go. So this is not permanent. However, the inflows have been consistent, and I personally don't see why they'd stop suddenly. I think we might see adjustments, but these things, obviously, once they've baked into financial products and baked into the sales funnels of certain asset managers, they don't tend to disappear from one day to the other. So definitely this chart is one that I'm looking at on a pretty regular basis, because it gives you a bit of an indication of how the market's going to be behaving.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I think this chart is actually really, really important. This is for people watching in or people listening in wanting to have a good source of information. This is farside.co.uk, and they have the Bitcoin ETF flow table. I think they publish it every single day, and they have the total, the average, maximum, minimums as well. So very, very useful content there to kind of keep your eye on. So thank you for that. Sammy, you just shared something as well. I'm just going to share it for people's information, but then I want to move on to the kind of ETH ETF discussion briefly. You shared this document which says up to $100 billion could flow into Bitcoin ETFs this year, says global banking giant Standard Chartered. It's just interesting. I think the main takeaway for me for this type of thing is that there's been certain rhetoric coming out of certain traditional institutions which have clearly decided that they want to be long, and they're being like exceptionally bullish on potential inflows and potential price action. And one other thing I heard, which was interesting from someone in the kind of prominent Bitcoiner, was like, what proportion of what's the word for them? Professional kind of wealth managers, what proportion of them are ready now to like push this to their clients? And the argument was that we're still at a relatively low proportion because for whatever reason, it hasn't passed risk. Maybe the CEOs like still want to finalize some details, like ultimately the product's very new. And like as that proportion rises and people will be able to actually offer these products that the people seem to want, the argument is that we should see a continued rise in flows because it's not even being offered by the full proportion of people, professional wealth managers yet. So that was an interesting perspective I heard also. Let's get into the ETH ETF thing. We've got 12 minutes left for the show. I want to touch on both the artifact news and this ETH ETF news. Legendary, maybe we'll come to you here first. Are we reading much into the significance of this headline? Like Fidelity adds staking to their ETH ETF application in an amendment. So the further context is here shown for the people watching in, but I'll read it out for people who are listening. According to the registration statement, the sponsor may, from time to time, stake a portion of the fund's assets through one or more trusted staking providers, which may include an affiliate of the sponsor. The key quote tweet from our favorite Bloomberg, one of our favorite Bloomberg reporters, James Safer, said Fidelity not giving up on the Ethereum ETFs and not giving up on the SEC, allowing them to stake within the ETF. Our base case is still that these are not going to be approved. Legendary, your thoughts on the significance of this development?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we very often on the show shared either Seifert or Eric Balkuna's takes and analysis on why they are thinking a bit in a negative way about the ETF approval in May. Kind of wanted to take 1 to 2 minutes to make a counterpoint to that.
Yeah, please.
And have the counter thesis by DC Investor, who has, I also pulled the link in the comments in our private chat, who has a completely different view on that. And is saying the following: the CFTC, the Commodities Future Trading Commission, has declared ETH to be a commodity, and previous SEC chairs have also ETH has CME futures with sufficient liquidity and years of runtime, has future-based ETFs. No other crypto assets have those attributes except for BTC and ETH. BTC ETF already paved the legal precedent for a spot ETF in court. And then that's the more speculative part, which I quite like. Gary keeps losing cases in court. He can't politically afford and another capricious enforcement action he can't win. And Fidelity adding the staking income to the ETF might be something that then in further negotiations with the SEC, they could just remove again and basically give up on that and kind of allow the SEC to save the face and allow for an approval. Obviously, a bit of speculation in that post, but I thought it was interesting to have a look at a different thesis that looks at the ETF approval a bit more positively.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you very much for providing the alternative. One maybe interesting contextual point is that I don't think that the Bloomberg reporters necessarily would disagree with like the bull case for the ETF. My understanding is from reading their comments and responses to the people commenting on their posts is that it's more of a practical thing why they think it will be denied at the moment, because from what they've seen, the people who are meant to be pushing this to the approval door are just not having the conversations that they need to. Like practically, they need to be going back and forth. And from what I understand, they're not seeing that at the moment. So nevertheless, I still think it's very helpful and interesting to hear this kind of perspective. And maybe Legendary in the end, it's kind of an inevitable thing. It's just the question, like, will it happen in May or will it happen later? Is that maybe your final position or a bit more open?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent summary. It will happen. I just don't know when.
Okay. Very, very interesting stuff. We have 8 minutes left to show. We want to get into a couple more things. Maybe I want to go to Mo just quickly to have his reflections on the kind of the ETH ETF, and then we're going to get into the Web3 roundup and then touch on the artifact news. Mo, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, definitely an interesting thing to keep an eye on, because that's definitely the #1 narrative driver for ETH this cycle, because Solana is there and Solana's garnering a lot of attention, sucking a lot of liquidity, and a lot of the degens have actually been more active in Solana. So the #1 driver for ETH this cycle is probably going to be the ETF. Then, who knows what's going to happen? You have very divergent, points of view being expressed across the board. But if you look at like the legal precedent, it's definitely pretty bullish for ETH, but nothing's guaranteed. And I think that if the ETF does get approved for ETH, it'll probably open a wider conversation around ETF approvals for other cryptocurrencies as well. Like, why not get an ETF for Dogecoin, for instance? I mean, if you look at it from a technical perspective, I think there is a case there. So let's see where this goes.
Yeah, very interesting. Definitely agree. Is one of the most bullish indicators, or one of the most bullish potential signal, or one of the most bullish potential things for ETH. I think also along with the restaking thing, which we've already touched on. So I think we've covered that sufficiently for today. Let's get into the Web3 roundup to get you up to speed with everything else that's been going on in the past 24 hours, as always, from the snapshot, which is pinned up top. But then we're going to hit the final headline of the day. So we have Memeland CEO 9gag sharing the reason for bidding for the dog with hat meme. And the reasons were these. For the suit, in 2021, the iconic image of Doge was purchased by Pleaser DAO for 1,696 ETH. That was $4.8 million. The NFT got fractionalized and had an all-time high valuation of 2.2 billion. So the ROI in fiat value was as high as 463x. So that was the kind of corporate reason for bidding on it. But the secondary reason is we love memes, we love dogs, and we love culture. So you can make up your mind which was more important there. #2, Nut Market announces airdrop for early Solana user signups after Beanie shared the opportunity. #3, former Binance CEO CZ announces new project, but he says there will be no new tokens and it will be an education project. #4, $900 million TVL Athena's token starts pre-trading on Avo at an FDV of 4.5 billion. Athena is that protocol that's created the synthetic dollar, which is very, very interesting. Next, we have Forbes announcing Forbes Legacy Pass, which will be 1,917 soulbound NFTs for creators and entrepreneurs. Number 2, $1 billion valued Polyhedra releases airdrop checker for today. And finally, ZachXBT reports that 655,000 Solana, which is $122.5 million, has been raised from 27 pre-sales in the last few days. Maybe drawing a line under the pre-sales. I don't know how many more we have to go, but that is an extraordinary amount of funding. Okay, we have 5 minutes left. We want to touch on the final headline. Maybe talk a little bit, if we can't talk specifically about Artifact because it's not confirmed, we did have similar news coming out of Starbucks earlier in the week. Basically, NFT Nick, Choose Rich Nick, reported this week that Nike intends to shut down Artifact. It was replied to by, I think, the co-founder or founder, Zaptio, said, seems like we missed the memo on our shutdown. Stay tuned for the next episode of Rumors from the Cryptoverse. So clearly denying that it was going to happen. Pio, also co-founder of the morning show, said that big brands like Starbucks and Nike winding down NFT Web3 verticals has probably been in the works for a calendar year. They probably capitulated at or near the bottom. It just took until now for the info to start coming out. Sammy, would love to go to you here to get your reflections on either the potential aspect of the shutdown for Artifact or even the trend, to the extent that it is a trend with just maybe rumors of this happening, but it also happening with Starbucks earlier in the week, of kind of the prominent companies shutting down their Web3 aspirations, or at least shutting down what's live at the moment, maybe with further plans to consider later. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think, I mean, looking at businesses sunsetting operations, I don't think it's necessarily a reflection of what's going on in the wider market. I think ultimately they're responsible to sort of speak to their shareholders about how they're performing. If they've got pressures elsewhere, then that business segment might be relatively small compared to the wider business. So, I mean, it doesn't surprise me. It won't be the first or the last time. And I think there will be a number of other probably shocks in terms of businesses being shut down just because they're not as profitable as other operations. So I was surprised by Starbucks. I wrote a piece on them a while ago, and
I thought they were doing quite well.
Yeah, they were doing pretty well, but I don't know to what extent how that fits into the wider business. Like how much of that overall revenue and resources do they want to allocate to doing that? So, but I think like for a long period of time, anyone who minted one of those NFTs was in profit. Like the floor price was pretty high because the value of holding that and the rewards that you get through experiences and things like that through Starbucks meant that people didn't want to sell them. So I thought they did a really good job, and I was just really surprised. I think Steve was as well from seeing what he was talking about in the timeline as well. So yeah, I don't know about Artifact. It could be speculation, but ultimately if they're running a business, they want to make it as profitable as possible, which means that they're kind of prioritizing the shareholders. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know about Artifact. It's hard to say. It's speculative.
Yeah, very interesting. I was also similarly very surprised about the Starbucks one, but as you say, I think maybe it depends. Like we don't know the financing, right? Like in the end, even if something is going well and it seems like, okay, community is happy. It's like, okay, fine. How much is it costing for like 200 people on the internet to be happy? Because I think at this particular point in time to construct these operations is exceptionally costly because we're so early. And so I can see a world where it's like the cost of those relatively small number of people being happy is way more than what it brings into the company. Shout out to Miss A, who just commented on Twitter, who said this was discussed in Vogue last month with a deep background in fashion. I'm not at all surprised, as Nike is about speed to market. Interesting. Another perspective I heard from the Artifact side or from Nike side is that they do have this Web3 swoosh vertical. Obviously, there's Artifact doing their own thing. They've been doing really awesome stuff for quite some time. Although the NFTs feels like people feel like they've been neglected for a period of time. But they also went off and just did this dot swoosh vertical on their own. So that's pretty interesting. Legendary, I don't know if you have any reflections on Swoosh versus Artifact versus like how it could sit all together for them before we close out.
Not any particular reflections on Swoosh versus Artifact, more so on the point that Sammy just made, that it's normal for companies to experiment and to stop things that are not most profitable. But I think the positive side of that is that you have people experimenting with blockchain tech and are building knowledge within a company like that. An interesting note that I had from a couple of conversation with founders of Web 2 to Web 3 marketing agencies over the last couple of months is that basically the consensus was there's not really interest from new companies, Web 2 companies, to come into Web 3. That was the case until BTC hit the 70K mark. Then, like over the last 2 weeks, suddenly those Web 2 companies became interested again. So, well, there might not be a correlation with the overall market if a project gets shut down or not, but that might be more correlated with how it performs internally. Definitely, interest is increasing when our market prices are increasing. So it goes at least one way.
It's one of those funny things though. Like I remember being at a law firm when I used to work at the law firm. They'd always talk about like hiring and spinning up these operations. It takes time, right? Like if you want to spin it up, it takes time. If you want to wind it down, it takes time. And if you're always being so super reactive, you could very foreseeably be winding something down at the bottom. And then by the time you've wound it down, you're then at the top again. And then you start it back up, but then you're at the bottom again. So you're just like in this constant cycle of always missing the thing because you're reacting, and it takes so much time to like implement the thing. And it's the same with hiring. It's like when you're at a law firm and you're like absolutely slammed, like every single associate is busy and you're like, okay, we've got to hire. It's like, okay, cool. That's going to take you 3 to 6 months. In 3 to 6 months time, you're suddenly not busy anymore. The market's cooled off. And now you've got all these people who's working for you, and there's no demand for the work. So it's a challenging thing to do. I can see the challenge for sure. But look, guys, we've run over time. That's been a fantastic show. Thank you so much for joining us. Mo, special guest for the day, head of community and education at Ledger, for the people who have just tuned in a little bit later. Thank you so much for joining us. How can people keep in touch with you, Mo? I think you've given some great perspectives. You're a second/third cycler with a lot of experience in the market. How can people keep in touch with what you're up to and what you're thinking about?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me, guys. That was a lot of fun, and definitely follow me on Twitter. Handle is Mo_Rels, RELS. Hit me up via Twitter, and then you can also access my Forecaster account as well. Trying to keep up with all of these different social media platforms that are popping up in the space. But again, thanks, guys.
Awesome, man. Thanks so much for joining us. Definitely give Mo a follow to keep up with everything he's up to. But that's it from us, guys. If you're new here, we run this show every single day at 7 a.m. Eastern time. We go through everything that's going on in the crypto and NFT markets. Thank you to my co-hosts, Legendary and Sammy. Thank you to Mo for joining us, and our speakers, Bread, NFT Stats just joined towards the end, Funky as well, and Tiro. And thank you to everyone in the audience. We hope you have a wonderful day, and we will see you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.